You are standing next to the most dangerous animal in the northern hemisphere. It weighs 80 pounds. It runs in a pack of a dozen. It can take down an elk twice its size by working as a team, and it has jaws strong enough to crack bone. This is a wolf. And at some point, tens of thousands of years ago, a human looked at this animal and decided the right move was to bring it closer, not throw a spear at it, not run. Closer. That decision, whichever human made it first, created the single most successful interspecies partnership in the history of life on Earth. There are more domestic dogs alive right now than every wild wolf, lion, tiger, and bear combined. One species out of thousands of predators on this planet made it into our homes, our beds, and our family photos. So how did we get from apex predator to the thing sleeping on your couch? And more importantly, why would anyone start that process in the first place? Let's deal with the obvious problem first. Wolves should have been the last animal on Earth humans ever tried to get close to. They were direct competition. Ice Age humans and Ice Age wolves were hunting the exact same prey, reindeer, horses, bison, in the exact same landscapes. A hungry wolf pack and a hungry human group were rivals for the same meal, not potential roommates. On top of that, wolves are not naturally friendly. A wild wolf's default response to an unfamiliar human is to run, and if it can't run, to fight. There was no reason to expect this relationship would ever work, and yet somewhere in the last Ice Age it did. This wasn't an obvious or easy pairing. It was closer to two rival gangs deciding to merge, which makes the fact that it actually happened one of the strangest events in our entire evolutionary story. One theory that's gained serious traction comes from paleoanthropologist Pat Shipman, and it reframes the whole question. Her argument is that wolves didn't just become companions, they became a competitive advantage against everyone else competing for the same resources, including other human species. Around 40,000 years ago, modern humans were moving into Europe, and Neanderthals were already there, extremely well adapted to that exact environment after hundreds of thousands of years. A newcomer species shouldn't have been able to outcompete a population that specialized for that long. But Shipman points out that this is roughly the same window when the earliest wolf-dog hybrids start appearing in the fossil record. Her hypothesis is that early modern humans, teaming up with wolves, gained something Neanderthals never had, an animal that could track prey by scent for miles, chase it down at speeds no human could match, and then hold it in place until the humans arrived to finish the job. A wolf's nose and legs, combined with a human's spear and social coordination, is a hunting system that simply didn't exist before. If she's right, domesticating wolves may not have been about companionship at all in the beginning. It may have been about survival, and it might have quietly tipped the balance in one of the biggest turf wars our species ever fought. But there's a second theory that doesn't involve humans making a decision at all, and it might be the more likely one. It's called self-domestication, and the basic idea is that wolves domesticated themselves. Here's how it would have worked. Ice Age human camps produced waste, bones, scraps, the leftover parts of a kill nobody wanted. That waste pile was a free, reliable meal sitting right next to a group of dangerous, spear-carrying primates. Most wolves would have kept their distance, because getting close to humans was a good way to get killed. But every wolf population has natural variation in temperament, just like people do. A small percentage of wolves would have been born with less fear, more curiosity, a higher tolerance for being near something unfamiliar. Those wolves could get close enough to the scrap piles to feed without panicking and fleeing, or attacking and getting killed. Over generations, the bolder, calmer wolves ate more, survived better, and passed that temperament on to their pups. Nobody selected them on purpose. The wolves selected themselves, simply by being the ones who could tolerate humans well enough to profit from living near them. This is sometimes called survival of the friendliest, and it flips the entire domestication story. In this version, humans weren't the ones reaching out, the wolves were. Here's where it gets genuinely strange, because we have direct experimental proof that this kind of selection actually works, and it didn't take tens of thousands of years to show up. In 1959, a Soviet geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev started an experiment on silver foxes at a research institute in Siberia. His question was simple. If you select animals purely for one trait, tameness, and nothing else, do you get a domesticated animal that looks and acts like a dog without ever touching its diet, its environment, or anything else? He and his research partner, Lyudmila Trut, took a population of fur farm foxes, and every generation bred only the calmest, friendliest individuals. Nothing else about the selection mattered, just temperament. Within about 6 generations, foxes started showing up that would lick a researcher's hand, whine when a person left the room, and wag their tails at the sight of a human. That part was expected. What nobody expected was the physical transformation that came with it. Within a few generations, without anyone selecting for appearance at all, some of these foxes developed floppy ears, curled tails, patches of white fur on the forehead, shorter snouts. Every single one of those traits is something you already associate with dogs. Selecting purely for calm behavior around humans was, on its own, enough to trigger a whole cascade of physical changes that make an animal look more juvenile, more approachable, more like a pet. If a wolf population went through even a rough version of this process near ancient human camps, tameness alone could explain a huge amount of what a dog eventually became, long before anyone was choosing which animals to breed on purpose. So when did this actually start showing up in the ground? The clearest, least disputed evidence comes from a site in Germany called Bonn Oberkassel. In 1914, quarry workers found the remains of 2 adult humans buried together with the remains of a dog, dated to roughly 14,000 years ago. That alone would make it one of the oldest confirmed domestic dogs ever found. But a re-examination of the bones in 2018 found something more specific. The dog had been a puppy, somewhere between 19 and 23 weeks old, when it contracted a severe case of canine distemper, a disease that in a wild wolf pup would have been a death sentence within days. The evidence shows this puppy survived for weeks after infection, far longer than the disease should have allowed on its own. The only realistic explanation is that someone kept it alive, fed it when it couldn't hunt for itself, kept it warm, nursed a sick animal through an illness with no practical payoff, because a dying puppy with distemper isn't going to help you hunt or guard anything. Whoever did this wasn't keeping a tool. They were keeping a companion they cared enough to fight for. That's not a utilitarian relationship. That's 14,000 years ago, and it already looks a lot like what people do for their dogs today. Now, here's the part where the story gets genuinely messy, because the exact timeline of when wolves became dogs is still an open argument among scientists, and that's worth sitting with instead of glossing over. Genetic studies looking at how far dog DNA has drifted from wolf DNA put the split anywhere from about 15,000 to 40,000 years ago, and some estimates push even further back than that. That's an enormous range for something this important. Some researchers have proposed it may have even happened twice in 2 separate parts of the world, with an eastern population and a western population, both independently taming local wolves before later mixing back together as humans migrated. We genuinely don't have a clean answer, and anyone who tells you the exact year wolves became dogs is guessing. What we do know is that the domestication process wasn't a single event with one hero moment. It was almost certainly slow, messy, and happened in more than one place, with wolves and humans circling each other for thousands of years before the relationship became what we'd recognize today. And once it did take hold, the changes kept compounding. Domesticated dogs ended up with smaller brains than wolves, particularly in the regions tied to fear and aggression, since an animal that doesn't need to survive on raw instinct in the wild doesn't need the same wiring. Their skulls shortened, their digestive systems adapted. Dogs carry extra copies of a gene called AMYB2 that lets them break down starch far more efficiently than a wolf can, a direct result of living alongside humans who were increasingly eating grain. Every one of those changes points to the same conclusion. This wasn't cosmetic. An animal built from the ground up to survive in a wolf pack got rewired generation after generation into an animal built to survive next to us. So why did ancient humans domesticate wolves? The honest answer is that it probably wasn't a single decision at all. It started with wolves bold enough to eat our scraps without getting killed for it. It turned into a hunting partnership that may have helped modern humans outcompete every other human species left on the planet. And somewhere in that process, it became something closer to family. Close enough that a person 14,000 years ago spent weeks nursing a dying puppy back to health for no reason except that they didn't want to lose it. You brought the most dangerous animal in the northern hemisphere into your home, and it worked. That's not a small thing. That's arguably the most successful bet our species ever made.